Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished loading the last delivery truck at the warehouse. The evening sun cast long shadows across the concrete floor, and most of his co-workers had already gone home to their families. But Marcus had nowhere to rush to except an empty apartment and a stack of unpaid bills waiting on his kitchen table. At 32, Marcus had never imagined his life would look like this. Just 2 years ago, he was married with a steady office job, living in a nice suburban house with his wife Sarah and their 8-year-old daughter Emma. Now he was a single father working double shifts at a logistics company, struggling to make ends meet after Sarah had left them for her yoga instructor, taking half of everything they owned in the divorce. The warehouse job wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep food on the table and maintain their small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Marcus had swallowed his pride long ago, trading his business suits for work boots and safety vests. What mattered most was being there for Emma, making sure she had everything she needed even if it meant he went without. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, his elderly neighbor who watched Emma after school. "Emma's doing her homework. Made extra soup if you want some." Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. Mrs. Rodriguez had been a godsend, refusing to take payment for watching Emma and often sending meals home with them. She reminded him that good people still existed in the world. As Marcus gathered his things and headed toward the employee parking lot, he noticed a sleek black Mercedes pulling up near the loading dock. This was unusual since the warehouse typically closed to outside visitors by this time. The car's tinted windows made it impossible to see who was inside, but Marcus could hear voices coming from the vehicle. Curiosity got the better of him as he walked past the car toward his old Honda Civic. The passenger window was cracked open just enough for voices to carry in the quiet evening air. Marcus wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the conversation was impossible to ignore as he fumbled for his car keys. "The shipment needs to disappear completely," a woman's voice said with cold authority. "No records, no questions, no traces. Our reputation depends on it. But ma'am, if the FDA finds out about the contaminated batches that already shipped, the lawsuits alone could destroy us," replied a nervous male voice. Marcus froze. His company handled shipments for dozens of businesses, including several pharmaceutical companies. The conversation was clearly about covering up contaminated medical products that had already been distributed to the public. "That's exactly why we're handling it this way," the woman continued. "We'll blame it on a storage issue at the warehouse. These people are expendable. No one will believe a bunch of warehouse workers over Pinnacle Industries." Marcus's blood ran cold. Pinnacle Industries was one of their biggest clients, and he had personally loaded several of their shipments over the past few weeks. The company produced medications for hospitals and pharmacies across 3 states. If contaminated drugs were already in circulation, people could die. The conversation continued with specific details about falsifying shipping records and bribing warehouse supervisors to alter documentation. Marcus realized he was listening to a criminal conspiracy that could affect thousands of innocent people who relied on these medications for their health and survival. He quietly backed away from the car and hurried to his own vehicle, his hands shaking as he started the engine. The black Mercedes was still there when he drove past, its occupants apparently still planning their cover-up operation. During the drive home, Marcus's mind raced with the implications of what he had overheard. Part of him wanted to pretend it never happened, to focus on his own problems and avoid getting involved in something that could put his job and Emma's security at risk. But another part of him knew that staying silent would make him complicit in whatever harm might come to innocent people. When he arrived home, Emma ran to greet him with a bright smile and a drawing she had made at school. "Look, Daddy, it's you and me at the park," she said proudly, showing him a colorful picture of 2 stick figures on swings. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said, kneeling down to hug her. "Did you have a good day at school?" As Emma chattered about her day, Marcus thought about all the parents out there who trusted that the medications their children took were safe and properly manufactured. He thought about elderly people relying on heart medications, cancer patients depending on chemotherapy drugs, and countless others whose lives hung in the balance. After dinner and helping Emma with her bath and bedtime story, Marcus sat alone in his small living room staring at his laptop screen. He had spent the last hour researching Pinnacle Industries online, learning about their products and corporate structure. The company was led by CEO Victoria Sterling, a woman known for her ruthless business tactics and expensive legal team. Marcus realized that the woman's voice he had heard in the Mercedes matched television interviews he found of Sterling online. She was personally involved in the cover-up, which meant this conspiracy reached the highest levels of the company. His phone rang, interrupting his research. The caller ID showed his supervisor's name, which was strange since Ray Martinez never called employees at home unless there was an emergency. "Marcus, I need to ask you something." Ray's voice sounded tense and worried. "Were you the last one to leave the warehouse tonight?" "Yeah, why? Is something wrong?" "There was a break-in after closing. Someone accessed the shipping computers and copied files from the Pinnacle Industries account. Security cameras show a figure near the loading dock around the time you were leaving. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I had to ask." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Someone else knew about the contaminated shipments and was taking action. But now he was potentially connected to whatever was happening, which could put both him and Emma in danger. "I didn't see anything unusual," Marcus lied, knowing he couldn't reveal what he had overheard without putting himself at risk. "Just went straight to my car and drove home." After Ray hung up, Marcus realized he was now caught in the middle of something much bigger and more dangerous than he had initially understood. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back to his simple life of just working hard and taking care of his daughter. The next morning arrived with unexpected chaos at the warehouse. Marcus arrived for his usual 6 o'clock shift to find police cars and federal agents swarming the building. Yellow tape blocked the main entrance, and employees were being questioned one by one in the parking lot. Ray Martinez looked like he hadn't slept all night as he gathered the warehouse crew near the loading dock. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by visible stress and dark circles under his eyes. "Listen up, everyone," Ray announced to the confused workers. "There's been a serious situation involving some of our shipments. Federal agents are investigating, and they'll need to speak with each of you individually. Just answer their questions honestly and stick to the facts." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he watched FBI agents carrying boxes of documents and computer equipment out of the office building. Whatever had started last night was escalating quickly, and he was sitting on information that could either help the investigation or make him a target. Agent Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, called Marcus aside for questioning. They sat in the break room while she flipped through a notepad filled with handwritten notes. "Mr. Thompson, your supervisor mentioned you were one of the last people here yesterday evening. Did you notice anything unusual or see anyone who shouldn't have been here?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. He could tell her about the Mercedes and the conversation he had overheard, but that would immediately put him in the spotlight of a federal investigation. With Emma depending on him, he couldn't afford to lose his job or become a target for retaliation. "No, ma'am. Everything seemed normal," he replied, hating himself for the lie but knowing he needed more time to figure out the best way to handle the situation. Agent Chen studied his face carefully before making a note. "We're investigating reports of contaminated pharmaceutical products that may have been shipped from this facility. If you remember anything later, even something that seemed minor at the time, please call me immediately." She handed him a business card with her direct number. After the agents finished their interviews, work resumed with a tense atmosphere hanging over the entire facility. Marcus couldn't concentrate on his tasks, constantly looking over his shoulder and jumping every time his phone rang. By lunch break, he had made a decision that would change everything. Instead of eating in the cafeteria with the other workers, Marcus drove to a nearby coffee shop and used his phone to research the medications that Pinnacle Industries had shipped through their warehouse in recent weeks. What he discovered made him feel sick to his stomach. The shipments included insulin for diabetics, blood pressure medications for heart patients, and antibiotics for children with serious infections. If these drugs were contaminated, as he had heard Victoria Sterling discuss, the consequences could be catastrophic. For hundreds or thousands of people, Marcus thought about his own daughter and how he would feel if she needed medication that had been deliberately allowed to remain contaminated to protect a company's profits. The decision became clear, even though it terrified him. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, Marcus sat down at his kitchen table with Agent Chen's business card in his hands. He stared at the phone number for nearly an hour, knowing that making this call would set events in motion that he couldn't control or stop. Finally, he dialed the number. Agent Chen answered on the second ring, as if she had been waiting for his call. Agent Chen, this is Marcus Thompson from the warehouse. I need to tell you something important about what I heard yesterday evening. I'm listening. Mr. Thompson. Marcus took a deep breath and recounted the entire conversation he had overheard between Victoria Sterling and her accomplice. He described the black Mercedes, the discussion about contaminated batches, and the plan to blame the warehouse workers for storage issues. Agent Chen remained quiet throughout his account, occasionally asking for clarification on specific details. When Marcus finished, she was silent for several long moments. Mr. Thompson, what you're telling me is extremely serious. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard? Yes, ma'am. I've been thinking about it nonstop since yesterday. I know what I heard. This information could be crucial to our investigation, but I need to warn you about something. If Victoria Sterling and Pinnacle Industries are involved in this conspiracy, they have resources and connections that could make your life very difficult. Are you prepared for that? Marcus looked toward Emma's bedroom door, thinking about his responsibility to protect her while also protecting all the other children whose parents trusted that their medications were safe. Agent Chen, I have a daughter to think about, but I also can't live with myself knowing that people might die because I stayed quiet. What do I need to do? First, don't discuss this conversation with anyone, not even family members. Second, continue going to work and act normally. We'll need you to help us gather more evidence, but it has to be done carefully. Sterling and her people can't know that you're cooperating with us. Over the next few days, Marcus felt like he was living a double life. During the day, he loaded trucks and went through his normal routines at the warehouse. But he was constantly watching and listening for anything that might be connected to the Pinnacle Industries situation. Agent Chen had given him a small recording device disguised as a pen, along with instructions to document any suspicious activities or conversations. Marcus kept the device in his shirt pocket, feeling its weight as a constant reminder of the dangerous game he was now playing. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus noticed increased activity around the Pinnacle Industries shipments. Supervisors who normally stayed in their offices were personally overseeing the loading process, and several shipments that had been scheduled for delivery were suddenly being marked as returned to sender. When Marcus asked his coworker Tony about the returned shipments, Tony shrugged nervously. Ray told us not to ask questions about the Pinnacle stuff. Just do what we're told and keep our mouths shut. That evening, Marcus called Agent Chen and reported what he had observed. She confirmed that the returned shipments were likely part of the contaminated batches that Sterling was trying to recall quietly before they could be traced back to the company. We're getting closer, Marcus, Agent Chen said. But we need more direct evidence linking Sterling to the conspiracy. Would you be willing to wear a wire if the opportunity presented itself? Marcus felt his heart rate spike at the suggestion. Wearing a recording device to secretly capture conversations was far more dangerous than simply observing and reporting. If he were discovered, Sterling and her associates might view him as a direct threat to their freedom and financial empire. What kind of opportunity are you talking about? Our sources indicate that Sterling might visit the warehouse personally within the next few days to oversee the final stages of the cover-up. If that happens, we need someone on the inside who can get close enough to record her giving direct orders about destroying evidence or falsifying records. Marcus closed his eyes, knowing that agreeing to this request would put both him and Emma at serious risk. But he also knew that without concrete evidence, Sterling and Pinnacle Industries might escape accountability for their crimes while continuing to endanger public safety. Okay, he said quietly. I'll do it. But if something goes wrong, I need to know that Emma will be protected. You have my word, Marcus. We'll have backup nearby, and we'll make sure your daughter's safety is our top priority. Friday morning brought an unusual tension to the warehouse that Marcus could feel the moment he walked through the employee entrance. Ray Martinez was pacing near the loading dock, constantly checking his phone and barking orders at supervisors, who normally handled their own departments without interference. Marcus went through his morning routine of checking the delivery schedule and organizing his section, but he kept the FBI's recording device close at hand. Agent Chen had tested the equipment with him the night before, ensuring he knew how to activate it quickly and discreetly. Around 10:30, word spread through the warehouse that corporate executives would be visiting the facility for an unannounced inspection. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he realized this might be the opportunity Agent Chen had predicted. Ray gathered all the warehouse workers in the main shipping area for a hurried briefing. His hands were shaking slightly as he addressed the group. Listen carefully, everyone. We're going to have some very important visitors today, and I need everything to run perfectly. Don't volunteer any information that wasn't specifically asked for. Keep your answers short and professional. Most importantly, don't mention anything about the federal investigation or the returned shipments from earlier this week. Marcus exchanged glances with his coworker Tony, who looked equally confused and concerned about the unusual instructions. Other workers were whispering among themselves, clearly sensing that something significant was happening beyond a routine corporate visit. At 11:15, 3 black sedans pulled up to the warehouse loading dock. Marcus positioned himself near a stack of inventory boxes where he could observe the arrivals while appearing to work on routine tasks. Victoria Sterling stepped out of the lead vehicle, exactly as Marcus remembered her from the television interviews he had watched online. She was an imposing woman in her 50s, wearing an expensive navy blue suit and carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to having her orders followed without question. 2 men in dark suits flanked Sterling as she walked toward the warehouse office, both of them constantly scanning the area, as if expecting trouble. Marcus recognized one of them as the nervous voice he had heard in the Mercedes conversation, though the man looked much more composed in person than he had sounded that evening. Ray Martinez hurried over to greet the visitors, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious nervousness, as he shook hands with Sterling and her associates. Marcus couldn't hear their initial conversation, but he could see Ray nodding vigorously and gesturing toward different areas of the warehouse. After about 20 minutes of discussion in the office, Sterling and her group emerged and began walking through the warehouse floor. Marcus activated the recording device and tried to position himself within hearing distance without being obvious about his intentions. "Mr. Martinez, I need to see the specific loading area where our shipments have been processed over the past month," Sterling said in the same cold, authoritative voice Marcus remembered from that first evening. "Of course, ma'am. Right this way," Ray replied, leading the group toward the section where Marcus was working. As they approached, Marcus pretended to be focused on checking serial numbers on a clipboard while listening carefully to the conversation. "These are the loading docks where all pharmaceutical shipments are processed," Ray explained. "We've had the same crew working this section for over 2 years, so they know the procedures very well." Sterling examined the area carefully, paying particular attention to the computer terminals used for tracking shipments and updating delivery records. "And these systems automatically create permanent records of everything that goes through here?" "Yes, ma'am. Every shipment is logged with timestamps, product codes, and destination information. The system backs up to our main servers every night." One of Sterling's associates, the nervous man from the Mercedes conversation, stepped closer to Ray. "We're going to need those backup servers completely replaced due to a security concern. Can you have your IT department handle that immediately?" Marcus felt his blood run cold as he realized they were discussing the destruction of evidence that could prove the contaminated shipments had been processed through the warehouse. Ray looked confused by the request. "Replaced? Sir, those servers contain months of shipping data for all our clients. Wouldn't it be better to just upgrade the security software?" Sterling's voice took on a sharp edge that made everyone in the vicinity stop what they were doing. "Mr. Martinez, I'm not making a suggestion. This is a direct order from Pinnacle Industries as your largest client. Those servers represent a security vulnerability that threatens all of our operations. But ma'am, if we lose that data, we won't be able to track or verify shipments for dozens of companies. The regulatory agencies require us to maintain those records for at least 7 years. That's not your concern," Sterling replied coldly. "Your concern is following the instructions of your most important customer. I'm sure your company values our continued business relationship." Marcus could see Ray's face pale as he realized he was being forced to choose between regulatory compliance and keeping Pinnacle Industries as a client. The conversation was making it clear that Sterling was demanding the destruction of evidence to protect her company from liability. Sterling's other associate pulled out a tablet and began showing Ray something on the screen. "We've already spoken with your corporate headquarters about this situation. Your CEO has agreed to cooperate fully with our security requirements." "I see," Ray said weakly, clearly realizing he had no choice in the matter. "I'll contact our IT department immediately." Sterling nodded approvingly and then began walking toward the exit, apparently satisfied that her orders would be followed. But as the group passed near Marcus's work area, she suddenly stopped and turned around. "Mr. Martinez, I want to speak directly with some of your workers. We need to ensure that everyone understands the importance of discretion regarding our business relationship." Marcus felt his stomach drop as Sterling's eyes swept across the warehouse floor, eventually landing on him. "You there?" she called out, pointing directly at Marcus. "Come here for a moment." Every muscle in Marcus's body tensed as he walked toward the group, knowing that this unexpected interaction could either provide crucial evidence or expose his cooperation with the FBI. The recording device in his pocket felt like it was burning through his shirt. "What's your name?" Sterling asked as Marcus approached. "Marcus Thompson, ma'am." "How long have you worked here, Mr. Thompson?" "About 18 months, Sterling studied, his face carefully, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that she was trying to determine if he could be trusted. "Have you handled shipments for Pinnacle Industries?" "Yes, ma'am, I've loaded several of your trucks over the past few weeks." "And have you noticed anything unusual about those shipments? Any problems or concerns?" Marcus knew this was a critical moment. Sterling was clearly trying to determine if he had any knowledge about the contaminated batches or the cover-up operation. His answer could determine whether he remained under the radar or became a target for elimination. "No, ma'am. Everything seemed routine to me. I just load the trucks according to the shipping manifests." Sterling continued to stare at him for several uncomfortable seconds before nodding slowly. "That's good to hear, Mr. Thompson. It's important that workers focus on their assigned duties and avoid unnecessary curiosity about matters that don't concern them." The implied threat in her words was unmistakable. Marcus nodded and tried to appear as non-threatening as possible, while the recording device captured every word of the exchange. "Mr. Martinez," Sterling said, turning back to Ray, "I want you to personally ensure that Mr. Thompson and all your other workers understand that discretion about client relationships is a condition of continued employment. People who ask too many questions or share information inappropriately tend to find themselves looking for new jobs." "I understand completely, ma'am. I'll make sure everyone knows how important confidentiality is to our operation." Sterling and her associates left the warehouse a few minutes later, leaving behind an atmosphere of fear and confusion among the workers. Marcus returned to his station with his hands shaking, knowing that he had just recorded evidence of witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. That evening, Marcus sat in his car outside Emma's school, waiting for her after-school program to end while his hands still trembled from the day's events. The recording device felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket, containing evidence that could potentially bring down Victoria Sterling and her entire criminal operation. When Emma climbed into the passenger seat with her backpack and a bright smile, Marcus tried to push aside his fear and focus on being the father she needed him to be. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, forcing normalcy into his voice. "We learned about the solar system in science class. Did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons?" Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment Marcus could almost forget about the dangerous situation he was caught up in. "That's amazing. You're getting so smart," Marcus replied, genuinely proud of his daughter despite everything else weighing on his mind. During the drive home, Marcus noticed a dark sedan following them at a consistent distance. When he turned left at the next intersection, the sedan turned as well. When he made an unexpected right turn into a grocery store parking lot, the sedan continued past, but Marcus could see the driver's face in his rearview mirror, clearly frustrated at losing his target. Marcus parked near the grocery store entrance and waited for several minutes, pretending to check his phone while keeping an eye on the parking lot exits. The sedan was nowhere to be seen, but Marcus knew he couldn't take any chances with Emma's safety. "Daddy, why are we just sitting here?" Emma asked, looking confused. "I thought we might pick up some ice cream for dessert," Marcus improvised, not wanting to frighten her with the truth about why he was being cautious. They spent 20 minutes in the grocery store, during which Marcus used his phone to call Agent Chen. He spoke quietly while Emma was distracted by choosing between chocolate chip and cookie dough ice cream. "Agent Chen, I think we have a problem. Someone was following us after I left work today. Are you safe now?" "For the moment, but I'm scared they might have identified me as a threat. I got the recording you wanted, but I think Sterling's people are getting suspicious." Okay, listen carefully. I need you to meet me at the coffee shop on Maple Street in 30 minutes. Bring your daughter and act like it's a normal evening out. We'll need to discuss your safety and possibly relocate you both temporarily. Marcus felt his heart sink at the mention of relocation. Emma had finally settled into her new school after the divorce, and the thought of uprooting her again made him feel sick with guilt. But he also knew that staying put might put her in even greater danger. At the coffee shop, Agent Chen was waiting in a corner booth wearing casual clothes instead of her usual professional attire. She smiled warmly at Emma and introduced herself as one of Marcus's co-workers, which helped put his daughter at ease. While Emma colored in an activity book Agent Chen had thoughtfully brought along, Marcus quietly played the recording of his encounter with Victoria Sterling. Agent Chen listened intently through small earbuds, occasionally nodding as she heard Sterling's threats and demands for the destruction of evidence. "This is exactly what we needed," Agent Chen whispered. "Sterling just admitted to obstruction of justice and witness intimidation on tape. Combined with the evidence we've been gathering independently, this should be enough to move forward with arrests." "What does that mean for Emma and me?" Marcus asked, glancing at his daughter who was happily drawing pictures of spaceships and planets. "We're going to move very quickly now, probably within the next 48 hours. Sterling and her associates will be arrested simultaneously to prevent them from coordinating their defense or eliminating evidence. But until that happens, you and Emma need to be somewhere safe." Agent Chen handed Marcus a hotel room key and a credit card. "There's a suite reserved for you at the Hampton Inn on the other side of town. Check in under the name Michael Torres and don't go back to your apartment or the warehouse until I give you the all clear. But what about my job? Ray is expecting me to work this weekend, and if I just disappear, it's going to look suspicious. We'll handle your supervisor. As of tomorrow morning, you're officially cooperating with a federal investigation under witness protection protocols. Your job will be waiting for you when this is over." The next morning, Marcus woke up in the hotel room to find Emma jumping on the extra bed, thrilled by what she thought was an unexpected vacation. Room service had delivered breakfast and cartoons were playing on the large television, making the situation feel almost normal despite the circumstances. Agent Chen called at 9 o'clock with an update that made Marcus's blood run cold. "We executed search warrants at Pinnacle Industries headquarters and Sterling's home at 6 this morning, but she wasn't there. Her security team says she left town unexpectedly yesterday evening, and her private jet filed a flight plan to a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. So she got away? We're working with international agencies to track her down, but in the meantime, we arrested 7 of her associates, including the man you heard in that original conversation. They're all facing federal charges for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and endangering public safety." Marcus felt a mix of relief and frustration. Sterling's associates were in custody, but the woman who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy had escaped to avoid facing consequences for her crimes. What about the contaminated medications? "Are people safe now?" The FDA issued an immediate recall notice for all Pinnacle Industries products manufactured in the past 6 months. Hospitals and pharmacies across 3 states are pulling those medications from their shelves and notifying patients who may have been affected. So far, we've identified 12 people who became seriously ill from the contaminated drugs, but fortunately no deaths. Agent Chen's next words made Marcus realize the true scope of what he had helped prevent. "Marcus, our investigation estimates that if this cover-up had been successful, contaminated medications could have reached over 50,000 patients before the problem was discovered through normal safety monitoring. You literally saved thousands of lives by coming forward." That afternoon, Marcus sat by the hotel room window watching Emma play with toys that Agent Chen had brought for her, thinking about how dramatically his life had changed in just 1 week. He had gone from being a struggling single father trying to make ends meet to being a federal witness whose testimony would be crucial in prosecuting a major pharmaceutical conspiracy. His phone rang with a call from Ray Martinez, who sounded both relieved and confused. "Marcus, the FBI told me you've been helping them with some kind of investigation. I had no idea what was really going on with those Pinnacle shipments. Ray, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what was happening. I was trying to protect everyone at the warehouse from getting caught up in Sterling's mess. Don't apologize, man. You did the right thing." The FBI agents explained that Sterling was planning to blame all of us for the contaminated shipments. "You probably saved all our jobs and kept us out of prison." Marcus realized that his decision to cooperate with the FBI had protected not only thousands of unknown patients but also his co-workers and friends who could have been wrongfully prosecuted for crimes they didn't commit that evening. As Emma fell asleep in the hotel bed, Marcus looked out at the city lights and thought about the ordinary evening when he had overheard a conversation that would change everything. He had never wanted to be a hero or get involved in dangerous situations, but when faced with the choice between his own safety and protecting innocent people, he had chosen to do what was right despite the personal cost. Tomorrow, Agent Chen had told him, he would begin giving formal testimony that would help ensure Victoria Sterling's associates spent years in prison for their crimes. Sterling herself was still free somewhere in the world, but Marcus knew that the evidence he had gathered would eventually catch up with her as well. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the federal courthouse wearing the only suit he owned, preparing to testify before a grand jury about Victoria Sterling's pharmaceutical conspiracy. Emma was safe at school, unaware that her father was about to take the witness stand in one of the biggest corporate crime cases of the decade. Agent Chen met him in the hallway outside the courtroom, carrying a thick folder of documents and evidence that would support his testimony. "Are you ready for this, Marcus? The defense attorneys are going to try to attack your credibility and make you look like an unreliable witness." "I'm ready," Marcus replied, though his hands were sweating and his stomach was churning with nerves. "I know what I heard and I know what I saw. That's all I can tell them." The grand jury room was smaller than Marcus had expected, with 23 jurors seated in 2 rows facing the witness chair, where he would spend the next several hours, answering questions about everything he had observed and recorded at the warehouse. The federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez, began with basic questions about Marcus's background and employment history before moving into the events that had led him to become a key witness in the case. "Mr. Thompson, please tell the grand jury about the evening of March 15th, when you first overheard a conversation near the warehouse loading dock." Marcus took a deep breath and began recounting the story he had told so many times to FBI agents and prosecutors over the past month. He described hearing Victoria Sterling's voice discussing contaminated shipments and the plan to blame warehouse workers for storage problems. "And you're certain the voice you heard belonged to Victoria Sterling?" Prosecutor Martinez asked. "Yes, ma'am. I recognized her voice from television interviews I watched online, and I later saw her in person when she visited the warehouse." It was definitely the same person. One of the grand jurors raised her hand to ask a question. "Mr. Thompson, why didn't you report this conversation immediately to authorities?" Marcus had been expecting this question and had practiced his answer many times. "I was scared, ma'am. I'm a single father with an 8-year-old daughter, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I also wasn't sure anyone would believe me over a wealthy CEO. But when I realized that people's lives were in danger, I knew I had to come forward." The testimony continued for over 2 hours, with Marcus answering questions about the recording he had made, the intimidation tactics Sterling had used during her warehouse visit, and the attempts to destroy computer servers containing shipping records. During a break, Agent Chen updated Marcus on the ongoing investigation. "The good news is that we've recovered most of the contaminated medications before they could cause more harm. The bad news is that we still haven't located Victoria Sterling, though we've frozen her bank accounts and seized her properties. What about her associates who were arrested? 2 of them have agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. They're providing information about other illegal activities at Pinnacle Industries, including tax evasion and fraud schemes that go back several years." When the grand jury session resumed, Marcus was surprised to see Ray Martinez waiting in the hallway to testify after him. His former supervisor looked nervous but determined as they briefly spoke before Ray was called into the jury room. "Marcus, I want you to know that everyone at the warehouse is proud of what you did," Ray said quietly. "The FBI told us that Sterling was planning to have several of us arrested as scapegoats for her crimes. You saved our careers and possibly our freedom." That evening, Marcus picked up Emma from Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment where she had been staying after school. His elderly neighbor had been taking care of Emma during the court proceedings, refusing to accept payment and insisting that helping Marcus was the least she could do for someone who had shown such courage. "How did it go today, mijo?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked as Emma gathered her homework and backpack. "It went well, I think. The grand jury seemed to believe my testimony, And the prosecutor says we have a strong case against Sterling's associates. And what about that woman who started all this trouble? Have they found her yet? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. But Agent Chen says they're working with police agencies in other countries to track her down. She can't hide forever. Over dinner that night, Emma asked her father about the important meetings he had been attending for the past few weeks. Marcus had tried to shield her from the details of the case, but she was a perceptive child who knew something significant was happening in their lives. "Daddy, why do you look worried all the time lately?" Marcus set down his fork and looked at his daughter's concerned face, trying to find age-appropriate words to explain what had been happening. "Remember how we talked about doing the right thing even when it's scary or difficult?" Marcus asked gently. Emma nodded, her dark eyes serious and attentive. "Well, I learned about some bad people who were doing things that could hurt other families, and I had to help the police stop them. That's why I've been going to those meetings and why we stayed in the hotel for a few days." "Are the bad people going to hurt us?" Emma asked, her voice small with worry. "No, sweetheart. The police caught most of them and they're making sure we stay safe. Everything is going to be okay." That night, as Marcus tucked Emma into bed, she surprised him with a question that showed how much she had been thinking about their conversation. "Daddy, are you a hero now?" Marcus smiled and kissed her forehead. "I'm just your dad who tries to do the right thing. Heroes are people in movies and comic books." "I think you're a hero," Emma said sleepily. "Heroes protect people, and that's what you did." The next morning brought unexpected news that would change everything once again. Agent Chen called Marcus while he was making breakfast for Emma before school. "Marcus, we got her. Victoria Sterling was arrested at a private airport in Switzerland, trying to board another private jet. Swiss authorities are holding her for extradition, and she should be back in the United States within the week." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Does this mean Emma and I are completely safe now?" "It means the immediate threat is over, but we'll still need your testimony when Sterling goes to trial. The good news is that with her in custody, you can return to your normal life without security concerns." Later that day, Marcus returned to work at the warehouse for the first time since the investigation had begun. His coworkers greeted him with a mixture of respect and curiosity, treating him like a celebrity who had become famous for something. They didn't fully understand Ray. Martinez pulled him aside during lunch break to discuss the changes that had occurred at the facility during his absence. "The company brought in new management and updated all our safety protocols. We're also getting bonuses this quarter because several new clients want to work with us after hearing about how we cooperated with the federal investigation." "That's great news, Ray. I was worried that the negative publicity might hurt business." "Are you kidding? Companies want to work with a warehouse that has proven integrity. Your actions didn't just save lives, Marcus. You saved our entire operation." That evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment reading a newspaper article about the Pinnacle Industries case. The headline read, "Warehouse Workers' Courage Exposes Pharmaceutical Conspiracy," and the article detailed how his decision to come forward had prevented a public health disaster. The article mentioned that 12 patients who had received contaminated medications were recovering well, and that new safety regulations were being implemented across the pharmaceutical industry to prevent similar incidents in the future. Marcus's phone rang with a call from a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, he was surprised to hear the voice of an elderly man who introduced himself as Robert Chen, Agent Sarah Chen's father. "Mr. Thompson, my daughter told me what you did to help catch those criminals. I wanted to call and thank you personally because my wife takes heart medication that was on the recall list. You may have saved her life." The call reminded Marcus that behind all the legal proceedings and media coverage were real people whose lives had been affected by Sterling's crimes and his decision to speak up. Each person who had avoided taking contaminated medication represented a family that had been spared tragedy. As the weeks passed, Marcus began to feel like his life was returning to normal. Emma was thriving at school. Their financial situation had improved thanks to overtime pay and the company bonus, and the constant fear that had plagued him during the investigation was finally fading. But Marcus knew that the most important part of this experience was still ahead of him. Victoria Sterling's trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months, and his testimony would be crucial in ensuring that she faced justice for her crimes. The woman who had thought she could escape consequences for endangering thousands of lives, was about to learn that sometimes ordinary people find the courage to stand up against powerful corruption, no matter the personal cost. 6 months later, Marcus stood outside the federal courthouse on a crisp autumn morning, watching news vans and reporters gather for what would be the final day of Victoria Sterling's criminal trial. After weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal arguments, the jury was expected to return with their verdict. Emma walked beside him, holding his hand as they made their way through the crowd of reporters and onlookers. She was wearing her best dress and had insisted on coming to court for this important day, even though it meant missing school. "Daddy, are you nervous?" Emma asked as they climbed the courthouse steps. "A little bit," Marcus admitted, "but I'm proud that we helped make sure the bad people face consequences for what they did." Agent Chen met them in the lobby, greeting Emma with a warm hug and handing her a small bag of coloring books and crayons to keep her occupied during the proceedings. "How are you feeling about today, Marcus?" Agent Chen asked as they walked toward the courtroom. "Ready for it to be over," Marcus replied honestly. "This whole experience has changed our lives in ways I never expected." The trial had lasted 3 weeks, during which Marcus had spent 2 full days on the witness stand, answering questions from both prosecutors and defense attorneys. Victoria Sterling's legal team had tried every possible strategy to discredit his testimony, questioning his motives, his memory, and his character. But the evidence was overwhelming. In addition to Marcus's recordings and eyewitness testimony, the FBI had recovered deleted computer files, financial records showing bribery payments, and testimony from several Pinnacle Industries employees who had finally agreed to cooperate with the investigation. The most damaging evidence had come from Sterling's own phone and computer, seized when she was arrested in Switzerland. Text messages and emails showed her personally ordering the cover-up operation and discussing plans to blame innocent warehouse workers for the contaminated shipments. As Marcus took his seat in the packed courtroom, he looked across the room at Victoria Sterling sitting beside her defense attorneys. She was no longer the confident, intimidating woman he had encountered at the warehouse. Months of legal proceedings and negative publicity had taken their toll, and she looked tired and defeated. Judge Catherine Walsh called the court to order and asked the jury foreman to announce their verdict. Marcus felt his heart pounding as the foreman stood and cleared his throat. "On the charge of conspiracy to endanger public safety, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations, but Judge Walsh quickly restored order as the foreman continued reading. "On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant guilty." Marcus felt Emma squeeze his hand as the guilty verdicts continued. Victoria Sterling showed no emotion as each charge was read, staring straight ahead as her legal career and freedom disappeared. When the foreman finished reading all 12 guilty verdicts, Judge Walsh announced that sentencing would take place in 30 days and that Sterling would remain in federal custody until that time. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was surrounded by reporters asking for his reaction to the verdict. He had prepared a brief statement with help from the prosecutor's office. "I'm grateful that justice has been served and that Victoria Sterling will be held accountable for her crimes," Marcus said into the cluster of microphones. "But the most important thing is that this case has led to better safety regulations that will protect patients in the future." One reporter asked, "Mr. Thompson, do you consider yourself a hero for exposing this conspiracy?" Marcus looked down at Emma, who was beaming with pride beside him. "I'm just a father who did what any parent would do to protect children and families from harm. The real heroes are the FDA inspectors, FBI agents, and prosecutors who built the case that put Sterling behind bars." Agent Chen approached as the reporters began to disperse. "Marcus, there's something I wanted to tell you privately. The FDA has established a new whistleblower program based partly on your case. It's designed to encourage people in the pharmaceutical industry to report safety concerns without fear of retaliation." "That's wonderful news," Marcus replied. "Maybe other people won't have to go through what we experienced." 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in the same courtroom for Sterling's sentencing hearing. She had finally shown emotion during her lawyer's plea for leniency, breaking down in tears as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, I made terrible decisions that put innocent people at risk," Sterling said through her tears. "I was so focused on protecting my company's reputation that I lost sight of our responsibility to public safety. I accept full responsibility for my actions. Judge Walsh was unmoved by Sterling's display of remorse. Ms. Sterling, your actions endangered the lives of thousands of patients who trusted that their medications were safe. You attempted to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, and frame innocent workers for your crimes. The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison. Marcus felt a sense of closure as Sterling was led away in handcuffs. The woman who had threatened him and his co-workers would spend the next decade and a half behind bars, unable to harm anyone else with her reckless disregard for public safety. As they left the courthouse for the final time, Emma asked her father a question that showed how much she had learned from their experience. "Daddy, will other people remember what you did?" Marcus thought about the new safety regulations, the whistleblower protections, and the pharmaceutical industry reforms that had resulted from the case. "I hope they remember that ordinary people can make a difference when they choose to do the right thing, even when it's scary." That evening, Marcus received a phone call that brought their story full circle. Ray Martinez was calling with news about the warehouse where their ordeal had begun. "Marcus, you're not going to believe this. The company has promoted me to regional safety director, and they want to offer you a position as a safety compliance specialist. The job comes with a significant pay raise and health benefits for you and Emma." Marcus smiled as he looked around their small apartment, thinking about how far they had come from those dark days when he was struggling to make ends meet as a single father. "Ray, that sounds like an amazing opportunity. When do I start?" "Next Monday, if you're interested. The company wants someone with your integrity and courage to help develop new safety protocols for all their facilities." After hanging up, Marcus sat down with Emma to help her with homework. As she worked on math problems, he reflected on how a single moment of moral courage had transformed not only their lives, but had also led to changes that would protect countless other families. "Daddy, what's integrity?" Emma asked, looking up from her worksheet. Marcus smiled and put his arm around his daughter. "Integrity means doing the right thing even when no one is watching and even when it might cost you something important. It means being honest and standing up for people who can't protect themselves." Emma nodded thoughtfully and returned to her homework. While Marcus realized that the most important outcome of their experience wasn't the trial verdict or his new job opportunity, it was the lesson Emma had learned about courage, integrity, and the responsibility each person has to protect others from harm. Years later, when Emma would face her own difficult choices about right and wrong, Marcus hoped she would remember this time when her father chose to speak up against injustice, even though it meant risking everything they had built together. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not by soldiers or politicians, but by ordinary people who find extraordinary courage when it matters most.